You're listening to the Deep End Podcast, a ministry of Hermitage Church, where we have a conversation about Sunday's sermon and chat about ways we can go a little deeper in our faith. I'm Hunter Steinmetz, and I'm one of the pastors here at our church. Every week, we will listen in on a conversation with the preacher from this week about deeper theological pieces of the sermon and suggested practices on how we can embody this word and allow it to seep into our skin. We hope that this podcast will become a part of your weekly faith journey on your drive into work, as you do the dishes, or as you sip your coffee on Tuesday mornings. Thanks for jumping into the deep end with us. Let's listen in on this week's conversation.
Welcome back to the Deep End Podcast. We're excited to be with you and really excited for the topic that we're gonna talk about today. My name's Brad.
I'm Hunter, and this week we're in John chapter 15, verses 1 through 11. It's probably a scripture that you probably know pretty well. It's one of the richest metaphors in all of Jesus' teaching, where Jesus says, "I am the true vine, my Father is the gardener, and if you abide in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing." It's that abiding and vineyard language.
Yeah, at first glance, it sounds kind of poetic and peaceful. But for anyone steeped or kind of anyone who has journeyed through the Old Testament or what we would call the Hebrew Scriptures, this vine language is filled with a lot of things. Intensity, some judgment. We'll unpack that a little bit. It's filled with hope, and it's filled with kind of covenantal weight, the word covenant is all throughout Scripture, and it's this kind of carrying theme. Jesus isn't just picking a garden metaphor. He's placing himself in the middle of this grand narrative of Israel's story.
Yeah, in the Old Testament, there is a lot of vineyard language that keeps being repeated over and over by different biblical authors. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of using this same metaphor across one another. But it's mostly used to describe Israel's relationship with God. And sometimes it's positive, but more often it's a metaphor for God's disappointment in Israel and how they are not taking care of this vineyard that is Israel.
And probably the most famous example is in Isaiah 5, where the prophet sings a song of the vineyard. God plants a vineyard on a fertile hill. He digs it. He clears it of stones. He plants it with choice vines, builds a watchtower and a winepress. He does everything right.
But then when the harvest time comes, when it begins to yield wild grapes, there's just rotten fruit. So what does God do? He says he's going to remove its hedge and let it be trampled. And he explicitly says in Isaiah 5, "The vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel." And this is kind of the precursor to Babylon, that the vineyard is the house of Israel. And God has done all the right things, but it is only producing bad fruit. It's rotten fruit. So God says that he's going to remove the hedges from this vineyard and basically allow Babylon to come in, and that is their judgment. God did everything right. Israel didn't do their part.
Yeah. So in Isaiah, the vineyard becomes an image of Israel's failure to produce justice and righteousness. God expected justice, and the Hebrew word for justice is mishpat. It means a lot of different things, but instead got bloodshed, mishpak. The same root and kind of just these different outcomes. I think that'd be interesting to talk about just for a minute, like how some Hebrew words can just have a small variation and two very different meanings. But I think, if you hear that word mishpak and the word for justice, mishpat, when you hear mishpak, the word for bloodshed, you would instantly go to mishpat, which is the word for justice. It's really intriguing.
And it sounds a lot like justice, but it's not.
Yeah.
Both it's like a play on words. Bloodshed is not true justice.
Yeah.
Mishpak is not true mishpat. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what they're trying to do. So it seems, at least. But then there's Psalm 80, which pictures Israel as a vine brought up out of Egypt and planted by God. But something's gone wrong. The vineyard is in ruin. The walls are broken down, and the psalm becomes a plea. It says, "Restore us, O God, and let your face shine, that we may be saved."
Yeah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Hosea also all use vineyard or vine imagery. And it's the same theme. God plants, Israel withers. God prunes, Israel rebels. This kind of cycle that happens over and over and over.
And you can even, like, you're studying Jonah right now. You know, at the end of Jonah, this vine grows up, and then it gives shade to Jonah, and then it withers, and he's mad about it. You also have the parable of the vineyard workers that I preached on a couple weeks ago, where the owner of the vineyard is God, because it's keeping this same thought. There's also the parable of the wicked tenants that Jesus is telling the Pharisees in during Holy Week. He just right after the triumphal entry, I think this is right after he cleared the temple in Matthew's gospel, where in that he basically is saying, you know, you guys are the reason that there are wild grapes. So hearkening back to Isaiah. And Matthew says that the Pharisees and the scribes actually knew that Jesus was talking about them, which of course only made them want to kill Jesus even more, because he was equating them to Babylon, who was their ultimate enemy too. But that's what was happening. So now when we fast forward up to John 15 and hear how radical this statement is, Jesus says, I am the true vine.
Yeah, which is, I mean, just completely filled with meaning. He's not just saying I'm like a grapevine. He's saying I am the fulfillment of Israel's calling. I am what Israel was always meant to be. The failed vineyard of Isaiah 5 finds its renewal and fruitfulness in Jesus, kind of this culminating moment in this gospel text.
Which is such a beautiful, like literally, it's so beautiful that Jesus is saying, like, the vineyard that continues to fail and not be a great partner with the God who created it perfectly. I'm bridging the gap. You know, I am the vine, the vineyard owner, and I are doing this together. He has sent me. So Jesus is positioning himself both as like belonging to the vineyard owner, but also belonging to the vineyard itself. It's a really beautiful thing. He's positioning himself as this faithful Israelite, the source of fruitfulness and the embodiment of God's covenantal promise. And he's not just one of the vines in the vineyard. He is the very vine from which this vineyard has grown.
And the gardener is the Father in this. This harkens kind of back to Isaiah 5 again. God is still the one who plants, prunes, watches, and tends.
So that means when Jesus talks about branches being pruned or even cut off, it's kind of this callback to the prophetic judgment motif. But the difference now is there is an invitation to actually abide and dwell in this vine that is the vineyard.
Yeah, the text says that too, to even kind of just say that again. Abide in me, and I in you. The word abide in this passage is all over, 11 times in just these 11 verses, and it means to kind of stay, remain, dwell, continue, which moves away from kind of an often understood notion of like, we have to do everything. We have to do all of the work. We have to strive, but really it's just remaining in the presence of God.
It's a mutual abiding.
Yeah.
As you abide in me, I will abide in you, and as I abide in you, you will abide in me.
Yeah.
There's a partnership, there's a covenantal promise to this. And I think this is not just about believing in Jesus one time. Like to abide in something is to stay with, it's to dwell, it's to have this continual connection between the two. The branch cannot bear fruit by itself. It has to stay in the vine.
Yeah, and what does the fruit mean in this passage?
Yeah, I think in the context of John's gospel, fruit is not just moral behavior. It's not like 7 steps to being a better human, or like do these things and don't do these things and you'll be a good fruit. It's more, lots of times it's more like qualitative. It's hard to actually measure, but it's love, it's obedience, it's the overflow of life that comes from deep connection to Jesus. So when we look at verse 10, he says, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love.
Yeah. So the fruit, in a sense, like you just said, is kind of this lived out love, not the sentimentality type of love, but love rooted in obedience to the way of Jesus. The goal of this abiding is that our joy may be full, and that's exactly what verse 11 talks about.
And it kind of brings it full circle, that Jesus isn't just reusing Israel's vineyard language. He's actually redeeming it and making it new, giving it new life. And what was once a symbol of Israel's failure is now kind of this metaphor for the life that God is giving through Jesus. And to kind of say this earlier, say what I said earlier again, that Jesus belongs to the Father and to Israel. So he's bridging the gap between a vineyard that God made perfectly and a vineyard that Israel keeps trying to destroy. But now, if we can just abide ourselves into this true vine, then we're going to have a much better chance at knowing how to be a good vineyard, because we have not done that very well for all of history. So it's this beautiful culmination literarily across testaments, which is just a beautiful thing to me.
Yeah, I think that's why, kind of just step back just a little bit, it's so important to know the story.
Yeah.
From start to finish, and to know kind of these, like you said, textual connections, because it does make it so much more beautiful if we know that this imagery is spaced all the way throughout. Because we could just read John 15 and take the garden imagery, the abide in me, as it is, kind of at face value. But to know all of these different things throughout Scripture kind of also puts ourselves in the story, to see that it's not just this one small thing happening at this one time in this one place, but it's connected all the way.
And it's
throughout.
kind of, I'll use the word danger. It's kind of the danger of just going, okay, God, I'm going to flip my Bible open and I want you to talk to me. And then just pointing at something, and because most of the time you'll probably point to something and be like, what? What? I'm going to be destroyed? But to be able to know that all of Scripture is written in context, and when they're writing these things, when they're writing them, but also when Jesus is speaking, Jesus knows the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Jesus knows the Hebrew Bible like the back of his hand. He is what the Scriptures are talking about. So if we act like Jesus is just creating things on the spot, just making things up, rather than going, hey, remember those stories? I am he. It's me. Jesus is doing this all the time, so it's important that we can make the connection with what he's trying to do, not just so that we go, oh yeah, the vineyards in the Old Testament, but what did the vineyards mean in the Old Testament, and why is Jesus using those images, thoughts and ideas that are behind those images to support or what he's talking about now, because the vineyard is a failed Israel.
Yeah.
And so now he's saying, hey, remember the vineyard thing.
Yeah.
It's me, and it's okay. Come back to the vineyard, and I'll teach you what it means to be a good vine.
Absolutely.
Which is so much more beautiful.
It's so good. Yeah, and to zoom in just a little bit, we notice even just how relational this text is. There's no mechanical process. It's not do X and get Y. It's just simply stay close to me. It's the initial call from the early chapters of Genesis in the garden. Just be in relationship with me, and life will flow through you. The vine doesn't demand kind of this performance, but I think it's important to also say it's a two-way street, but the covenant happens with God.
Yeah.
We're in partnership, but we're trying to listen to the voice of the one we're in partnership with, so that we can live appropriately. But so life will flow through us. The vine doesn't demand, performance, but it offers kind of this deep connection with the one who created us.
And the pruning of fruitless vines in us, it's not punishment. It's formation. It's Jesus teaching us what it means to be a faithful vine in a faithful vineyard that God made good in the beginning. It's the gardener who's removing what prevents growth so that we can flourish. And we have to be careful too that it's not just flourishing so I can have a bigger house, bigger bank account, happier life. It's flourishing so that the will of God can be done in the world, that God can redeem the world. It's my flourishing should contribute to the world's flourishing.
I was thinking
And never be separate.
Yeah, as you were talking, it was like if I'm the only one who flourishes, then there's a problem.
Yeah.
Because everything is interconnected. So like my flourishing is deeply connected to my neighbors.
It should be.
It should be. Yeah, it has to be. And if it's
if
just,
so, it maybe is not of God.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, when one person flourishes in community, that tries to pass on. But if one person's suffering in community, then we also bear that with each other.
Yeah. Paul would be so proud of you. There's also that the warning piece of pruning, that branches that don't remain in the vine wither. So they dry out, they're gathered, and they're burned. So the gardener can prune things that are not helpful and prevent flourishing. That should be a benefit to community.
Yeah.
But then there's also that warning that if you choose not to abide in this true vine, who is Jesus, the vine will dry out.
Yeah.
This is the source of true life.
Absolutely. Which reminds us that Jesus is not generic spirituality, which we get a lot of these days.
Yeah.
He's not one of many vines. He's the true vine. He's the source of life. To remain in him is to bear fruit. To separate from him is to dry out. And sometimes we don't even realize we're drying out.
Yeah.
In the world, but we are.
Sometimes you don't. I mean, I don't mean this as a joke.
No.
Even though it's kind of funny. Sometimes you don't know you're dehydrated until you just pass out.
Dang. Yeah.
You know. So what is kind of the takeaway? I would say that for a congregation listening to this, especially those who have been in the Old Testament for a long time, Jesus is saying something that we should really be paying attention to.
Yeah, you were a wild vine, but I've grafted you in. You were a barren vineyard, but I've made you fruitful again, not through striving, but through abiding.
So the story of Israel's vineyard failure does not end in judgment. It ends in Jesus offering himself as the true vine and inviting us to remain, to dwell, and to flourish, and for Jesus to be the example of what it means to be a good vineyard. We can look at this vine who took on flesh and has 10 fingers and 10 toes, 2 eyes, a mouth and a nose, and go, wow, this is what it means to be a faithful vineyard.
Yeah.
And it may get us killed like it did him because people weren't happy about it.
It makes me think of, too, how Jesus becoming human, like you said, 10 fingers, it speaks so much to the goodness in humanity. I think God becoming flesh speaks to the reality that God is saying creation is good. And we often live in a world where spirituality is, your body isn't good, creation isn't good. Just get what you need and try to get out of this place.
Yeah, when God becomes human, he doesn't make humanity good.
Yeah.
It already was. He did that in the beginning.
Yeah, so I think...
But we can become unfaithful vineyards.
Absolutely.
And do terrible, horrible things, commit evil.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change the fact that humans are good. You can hold both things.
Yeah. It made me go back to, I don't know if it was last week or if it's the week before, but when we talked about holiness, that this kind of, too, is in itself a holiness text of abiding in the vine.
No doubt.
Becoming like the vine. But there's ways of living that cause us to not become like the vine. But if we just abide, we end up taking on the characteristics. But I think kind of to wrap it up as in a sentence is life is found by staying connected to the vine, Jesus.
Yeah. So I hope that this was meaningful to you. I mean, I'm becoming more and more passionate about like intertestamental scriptures. And so I always want to help us think intertextually, intertestamentally, which just means between the texts or between the testaments. So I hope that this has begun to reframe for you what Jesus means by this, that he's actually hearkening to Isaiah's language and lots of other vineyard language in the Old Testament. So we're grateful that you spend this time with us, and thanks for joining us. We'll see you on Sunday.